There are 7 levels of spiritual amnesia that keep you trapped. I'm going to show you how to break every one of them. You do not suffer because you're broken. You suffer because you've forgotten who you are. See, spiritual amnesia is that feeling you get when you feel like you've spent so many years on growing, so many years on developing, on following your inner voice, following God's will. But when life falls apart, all of a sudden, it's like you forget everything. I can't tell you how many times I hear people say, it's like I can feel the power of the infinite moving through me, and then it just all goes away. Like I can't stay there. Someone passes away. Someone overlooks you. Someone disrespects you. And all of a sudden, it is like the knowledge of ages gets lost to time. If you're ready to live free beyond fear, welcome here. I'm Dr. Shawn, and I believe you do not need years to heal. You just need one real breakthrough. That's why I invented transcendent psychology, and I test it in the real world on real people on my game show, Countdown to Breakthrough, the only game show that heals your soul. We're talking about spiritual amnesia. What I want to do is hit to a clip of Countdown to Breakthrough, because this is actually going to set up our conversation and our lesson as we jump into the 7 levels of spiritual amnesia. There's one thing I need you to know first. We need to get clear on what this concept of infinite consciousness is. Here we go.
Will you be among the few to discover a whole new universe within? Welcome. This is Countdown to Breakthrough. Excuse me, ma'am. Hi there. Actually, I was just hoping to show you how beautiful your mind is. Before we start, what is infinite consciousness and how can we use it? To answer that question, imagine that long before the universe existed, there was an infinite field of awareness, and this awareness was you. Without a body to fear dying, without another to fear ridicule, being everything, you had everything. There was nothing to want. Until one day, you decided to see yourself with human eyes. And so you dreamed that you were human. You make believe in history, time, humanity, the world, and universes, all so you can see yourself in a million different ways from the eyes of a human being. To make your trick complete, you decide to forget who you really are, to forget that you are an infinite being merely dreaming, so that your dream can feel real. But deep down, you know your dream is only temporary. And one day, you will wake up laughing, remembering you are boundless. Were you to give this dream a name, it would be called today. What I've just described to you is kind of like a creation story for consciousness.
There it is. The reason that suffering can happen on this plane of existence is because we engage in a certain forgetfulness. I'm calling that forgetfulness spiritual amnesia. This forgetfulness, this spiritual amnesia requires that we lose touch with our original nature, lose touch with the infinite, and so get caught up in the distractionary world. And so level 1 looks like this. Of spiritual amnesia is this: the forgetting of presence. This is where you leave the now. When you forget presence, that's the moment when you're walking through your day, you're going through your day, and all of a sudden you're distracted by what you have to do next. You're distracted by future, or your mind gets swallowed up in some trauma that happened in your past. You're distracted by past. Either way, you have left the now. This is the first level of spiritual forgetfulness. It's the first level of spiritual amnesia. The second level is this: the forgetting of wholeness. Once you forget to be present, once you forget to stabilize yourself in the present moment, You leave a unitary experience. At that moment, you are dividing the world into at least two parts, you and it. This is where you see yourself as separate from existence. Something happened to you. A future is coming for you. You no longer see yourself as embedded within the deep fabric of reality. Instead, you see yourself as a tiny person with all these problems. That forgetting of wholeness leads to the third level of spiritual amnesia. That's the forgetting of power. That life now happens to you instead of through you. When you forget that wholeness, that oneness, you forget that you're not the one calling the shots, not you as a tiny individual human, that there is a sacred cosmology that is working on your behalf, but you can no longer see it once you've left the domain of wholeness. You've robbed yourself of that domain of power. That's why the third level of spiritual amnesia is the forgetting of power. Life now happens to you, which leads to level 4. This is the forgetting of purpose, forgetting the very reason that you chose to come into human form in this lifetime, forgetting the very reason that you chose to come into human form in this lifetime. What are you actually here to do? If life is happening to you, then that feels like somebody else is in charge of your purpose. And maybe after you get done doing X, Y, and then Z, maybe you can have some time later for a purpose. Maybe once you get off work, maybe once you go ahead and get the kids through college, maybe once in the future you can return back to the reason you were born, but for now you forgot it. This is the forgetting of purpose. It's level 4 of the 7 levels of spiritual amnesia. Level 5 is the forgetting of voice. Once you've forgotten your purpose, you no longer can hear the inner voice speaking to you. You're not even listening to it. You've forgotten what it sounds like to listen to it in the first place. This is the forgetting of that inner voice. Can you see how we're going deeper and deeper and deeper into these deeper levels of forgetfulness? Level 1 wasn't so bad. The problem is that it snowballs into these deeper and deeper domains of destruction. And so, level 6, if you can no longer hear your inner voice, you're apt to see yourself through your own pain, which is the 6th level of spiritual amnesia. And seeing yourself through your own pain, the worst part is that leads to number 7, which is the forgetting of love itself. It's where you forget that love and self are one. You would be surprised at how many people there are who are already operating with a certain level of wisdom, but if you ask them to feel love right now, just to turn it on, just to feel love inside of their own body, to feel it like a radiant light, to feel it like a radiant energy, these folks struggle. And doesn't it make sense if they were already at the 7th level of spiritual amnesia? Think about all the things that they had to go through. Think about all the things that they had to go through, that they will have to go through in order to return back to self. But someone has to remember. So, if in the beginning you were this awareness, would you like to remember? In transcendent psychology, I like the teaching from principles because once you understand the principles, it's easy to find the pattern and it's easy to find the path forward. So, I like to talk in terms of principle, pattern, and path. Let's handle the principle first. Here we go. I'm gonna keep this. I'm gonna keep my board. This concept of spiritual amnesia happens. What I'm calling this concept of spiritual amnesia. This happens once you forget the self. That's the principle. All spiritual amnesia, all 7 levels of spiritual amnesia are really just one level of forgetting the self. They are 7 stages of mutation after you've forgotten the self. The self is more than your body. The self is more than your mind. It's more than your intellect. It's more than your capacity for reasoning. It's more than left hemisphere of the brain, right hemisphere of the brain. We see that modern science tells us that our universe appeared from a big bang, a single speck of matter. But as the single speck of matter expands, it never becomes two things. It only looks that way. It's not like another speck of matter came through from another universe and started adding up. Like, no, it's not a cumulative pile. It's an expansion, a single speck of substance expanding and becoming our known universe. That single substance, if you wanted to take the matter model. In transcendent psychology, we don't really take the matter model. We just say consciousness. But for people who do like that route, either way, that single substance is the self. We recognize that there can be no distinction. If God is infinite, there cannot be another place where God isn't. In other words, that infinity of God must run through each of us to the point where an each of us isn't even possible. It's just infinity, which means it's just God. That God is what we call the self. More than just yourself. We're talking about the self. Let me know if that's not making sense. That's the principle. Spiritual amnesia happens once you forget the self. Let me know in the chat. Put one in the chat if that's making sense to you. I don't mind pausing and articulating this a different way. Before we move on to the pattern, let me know that you got the principle. We got the principle that spiritual amnesia happens when we forget the self. What's the pattern here? I mean, why is it that we forget the self? Why across all cultures, across all human timelines up to this point in recorded history, there are plenty of instances where most people are living in a state where they have forgotten the self. Why is it that humans in general, why do we forget the self? This is the pattern I want to start getting at. So here we go. The reason that human beings forget the self is because human beings have a problem with human perception. You forget the self because you are limited by the five perceptions, by the five senses, rather, that make up human perception: sight, sound, taste, touch, smell, right? The five, that's why I made these lines right here. Okay. We're getting real artistic. The five lines: sight, sound, taste, touch, smell. These five senses are limitations of human evolution at this particular point in history. And they create the optical illusion that you are confined within a single human body and you are reacting to a hostile planet. That human perception creates the optical illusion, the experience of being limited, of not being infinite, of being a finite individual who's only got a finite amount of time to be alive and get as much money as you can and get as much this as you can and get as much that as you can and save up for your kids and all this. That sensibility, that is the foundational element in all warfare. What are we talking about when we talk about war? It's people who a lot of times are fighting over trade routes. And so believing that the resources are limited, people fight to protect them, to establish them, to dominate them. That's on a scale of warfare. But when we're talking about just the individual, isn't it the same thing? That when you feel limited based off of what you can see, based off of what you think is possible, based off of what you've seen before, you come to conclusions about what can be true for you and what isn't. And usually those conclusions are not expansive. How could they be? You arrived at them from a place of limitation. That's why in transcendent psychology, what we're doing is putting you back in touch with the infinite. And what if there was a simple way to do it? That's what I spend all my time meditating on. What if there was a simple way to do it? We understand the principle is that spiritual amnesia happens when we forget the self. We forget the self because we are limited by the five senses due to the current stage of human evolution. In other words, future humans can develop sense organs that allow for them to expand their perception. There are already humans walking the planet who have an expanded sense of perception. That's all well and good. But if in the end you simply feel confined to a limited body who has a limited destiny, is it any wonder that people always struggle with two basic fears? Two basic fears? The two basic fears are the fear of lack and the fear of death. If you believe you are limited and that resources are limited, then it stands to reason that there isn't enough to go around. Of course, you would reason from a scarcity mindset. That's a lack based fear. If you believe you are limited and you believe life is short, of course your time is finite and could be made more finite if something happens to your limited body. You dig what I'm saying? That's the fear of death. Okay. I just want you to understand how the limited five capacities of human perception, the five senses, create an optical illusion that forces the human being to see itself as a limited individual in a hostile world where it's winner take all. And until you can invite wisdom back into the process, someone who is seeing from that standpoint is going to quickly fall through the levels of spiritual amnesia. They've already forgotten who they are. They believed the optical illusion. What did the Buddhists call this optical illusion? The Buddha called the illusion Maya. So now we got the principle. Spiritual amnesia happens when you forget the self. We understand the pattern that you forget the self because you are limited by five senses due to the current level of human evolution. Okay, now we need the path forward. What would that actually be? Oh, here it goes. If you can remember love, you will automatically remember the self. The seven levels of spiritual amnesia are nothing as compared to love. Hmm. When I say love, I am talking about the end of separation. I am talking about oneness. Therefore, to return to love is to return to the deep fabric of existence, to that which cannot be separated out, to that which is the total substance of all that is. Some say the Tao, some say God, some say deep reality. I just call that love. Why do I call it love? I call it love because I know that wherever you have been in your life, you know what love is. Of course, the problem is that people start attaching love to things that love isn't. And rather tonight, I'm asking for you to think of love as in two phases, let's call it. There is love, the mental position, which is where we can cleanse the windows of your perception such that you can see beyond the five senses and see to the unitary oneness that is existence and reality itself. It doesn't work if we just sit and talk about it. You have to actually see it. Then number two is to put our attention on and feel the energy of love. When you enter that mental position, that oneness will beget the emotion of love. You won't be able to stop it from coming to you because the self is that unitary oneness. The self is that love. And so, just to recap the principle, spiritual amnesia happens when you forget the self. The pattern behind that forgetfulness is bound up with the trouble of the five senses, human perception. That sense that you're limited because of what you can see, taste, touch, hear, smell. But the path forward is not to try and sit and remember some cosmic self. Just remember love, which automatically connects you back to the domain of oneness. And you're there, present, in power, in tune with the inner voice.